The next session. The next session is the fireside chat from code to career. How open source can change your life. This will be the fireside chat. Please welcome Chung Weitat, project lead and summit organizing team, FOSSASIA. Marco A. Gutierrez, software engineer at Intrinsic, an alphabet company, and Peter Membrey, Chief Research Officer from ExpressVPN. Please welcome to join the fireside chat.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so yes, hi everyone. So yeah, this will be a fireside chat, but before we begin, so there's actually a QR code right at the top. So just feel free to send in your questions. At the end of the session, if we have some extra time, we will just run through some, burning questions for them. And of course, the best question stands to win a mysterious prize. Okay? So without further ado, let me begin. So I'll do a quick introduction. So I'm Weitat, a long-term FOSSASIA contributor, supporter. I think near 10 years, maybe not there yet, but yeah. Professionally, I work in AI Singapore, so mainly along partnerships and programs. So if there's any things aligning there, feel free to find me. So also, let's give a round of applause for our Peter and Marco as well for taking their time here. Okay, so let's begin off with a quick self-introduction. Maybe Peter would like to go first? Yep.
Sure. So my name's Pete Membrey. I'm the Chief Research Officer at ExpressVPN. I've been there for over 8 years, and I work on all the R&D and technical weird stuff that our platform requires. And I've been using open source since I think I was about 12, so that's now a disturbingly long time ago.
So my name is Marco. I'm from Spain, but I live here in Singapore. I'm involved in mostly the robotics side, and even though I got into open source early when I started studying computer science, it was more when I got into robotics where I really started being more part of it, not just a user, and that was like when I was like doing my PhD, and then I got into it for my entire career. And right now, lately, it's mostly on working on the robotics operating system (ROS). That is like my day-to-day work in open source.
Okay, cool. Does everybody know what ROS is? Okay. Okay, so maybe not a lot. Maybe Marco would want to elaborate a bit more what's ROS?
Right, so the robotics operating system is not an operating system. You gotta be careful what you name things. It's basically a framework. It runs on top of any Linux system, Windows, Mac OS, and basically it allows you to set up the entire stack for our robotic systems. And because the community is very large, you have access to a lot of state-of-the-art algorithms that you can just set up. You can basically, if you know how to handle it, you can set up a robot, map a room, and have it moving around in just an afternoon.
Okay, cool. So I hope that answers some or for those who actually don't know what ROS is, yeah? Okay, so first off, so I've prepared quite a number of questions for both of you. So because this is also part of career, right? So I think it's also important to know actually how you started. What's your first experience with open source, right? Maybe Peter, you could start off with that, yeah. What's your first experience, and what kind of motivates or drew you to it? Yeah.
So kind of my first experience with open source was almost accidental. I was learning more about like networking and stuff, so I was interested in doing web design, so I needed a web server. I used Apache. I tried to do some stuff in Perl, got kind of scared of that, found PHP, which looked a lot simpler, and then realized a lot of the challenges that, you know, I had with power could go away if I used a database. So I needed a database. And so back then, I didn't really fully appreciate the value of what I had, but I was able to already build platforms and tools that a business and a school were actually using, like on day-to-day, you know, production effectively. And it was around actually that time that I started really appreciating how easy this was. We actually had an issue at the school where I was semi-working, semi-a-student, and we had a networking issue. And we tried to call out the company to come fix it for us. We had a big event the next day, which is always the case. And they said, sure, we'll do that, but it's going to cost you this extortionate amount of money. And I'm like, well, we're a tiny little school. Like, could we get a discount or something? The answer was no. And at that point, I actually studied for the Red Hat Certified Engineer. So I was actually able to go to school and say, hey, look, you know, I can't fix this, but I can give you something that's going to be good enough. Tomorrow's going to look great. And then you can book these guys in on a normal schedule and it'll be a lot cheaper. And we did that. And it was a great success. Everything kind of worked. But 3 months later, we're still running on like an entirely Linux like backend. And so I was asking, well, when's this guy coming to fix this? And they said, well, he's not. How can we make this justification to take a large amount of money to put it back the way it was when even the printers haven't stopped printing for 3 months? And so when you can convince a school that has no real interest in tech to keep a completely open system, even though they don't fully understand it, but can see the value, yeah, that's really what drew me into it. And ever since, I've been trying to do the same thing wherever I go, add this value, and then also kind of, you know, bring back into the community.
Okay, that's very insightful. So is that somewhere aligning with, because you were mentioning earlier about networks, right? So ExpressVPN is also about networks. So is that something along, I think ExpressVPN has this thing called Lightway protocol, right? Is there something along those lines where, how deep, maybe how, I'll put in a way, how deeply involved were you with Lightway? Is it because it's an open source library, it's an open source repository, people can contribute, right? How do you actually, did you got, how do I put it in a way where, how does Lightway plays a part in actually the open source? Yeah, that's actually what I want to convey, yeah.
Sure, so Lightway is ExpressVPN's VPN protocol. It's the primary protocol we use. Over 98% of our users are connected with Lightway, and we secure billions of connections every few months. We transfer, you know, ridiculous amounts of data through it. But why does it actually exist? I mean, I have a whole talk on that, and it's which I won't bore you with now. But basically, we Express, like many other you know, now popular VPN platforms, we're all based and we all grew on open source. Almost all of them offer OpenVPN, for example. And around 2020, when, say, WireGuard started getting really popular, and WireGuard was amazing. It blew everyone's mind with how fast and how easy and how lightweight you could make a VPN. And so some providers were moving to WireGuard as their main protocol. But the problem is, if you're trying to do point-to-point with WireGuard, it's easy, and it's really nice to set up, and it's easy to scale. When you've got many thousands of servers and millions of users, doing WireGuard the way it's meant to be it's not fun. So what we wanted was an alternative. We wanted to go have the core and the benefits that we've had with OpenVPN for a decade and take all that knowledge and experience. But we also wanted the new shiny speed and security that WireGuard was having. And nothing really kind of fit that need. So as with many open source projects, you know, we scratched our own itch and we said, okay, well, what is it that we need to deliver the best experience that we can deliver? And then it was created specifically for that. How it applies to open source is, as a company built on open source, it just made sense to us to release it. Obviously, it helps improve trust, but also, like, critically, we benefited so long from using OpenVPN. We've got this new thing. It might be beneficial for you. Like, it might be nicer, it might be faster, it might be easier. And so we thought, well, the only right thing that we can do is, return this, from whence it came almost.
Okay, thank you. So we understand also there's quite a number of misconceptions about open source, right? So I think this question is for Marco. Given working with ROS and maybe other open source projects, what are some of the common misconceptions of developers that you have identified? And actually, how do you think they can overcome them? Yeah.
All right. Misconceptions about open source. I think one big one that we have, and I found quite around Singapore, is that you can't do business with open source. It's hard to convince people that they can benefit from an open source ecosystem, and we try to do that. We had this project down there called the Robotics Middleware Framework, which is basically, so the problem that we were trying to solve is in a big building, they had different fleets of robots, and usually vendors, they lock in their own fleet of robots, so they don't talk to other fleet of robots, right? They have their own software. So what we're trying to solve there is we're trying to build an open source framework on top of this that allows vendors to actually talk to each other. So one of the biggest challenges that we were facing is trying to tell these vendors, if you open your API, it's not even getting open source, it's like the first step, right? Like getting to open the API, you can benefit, right? Like you'll have people that will come and say, oh, I can integrate your solution into my building now because I can have the elevator talk to your like AMR or whatever, right? Like I think that was one of the biggest challenges. Another one, typical one, and probably Peter can talk more about it, but like there's no security. It's harder to put security on open source. Like you put in the code out there, and then wow, everyone's gonna find out all the flaws, and then everything is gonna. But then you can always say that you can see open source projects that are quite safe, right? Like you can probably talk more about that. Yeah, but I think the business part is still a big one, especially in the Southeast Asia. And there's many ways you can find people here doing business in their own ways. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just a quick poll. So who actually also encountered the similar issues when trying to pitch an open source ideas to a company in Asia? Who faced any difficulties? Can I have like show of hands? Okay, one. So not a lot of business people here, yeah. Okay, so personally, I also have tried to pitch some open source ideas out to the businesses, but yes, I think it's what Marco mentioned earlier. They are a bit receptive. They will be like, where's the dollars and cents? How do I sustain this? What is open source, They have all these quite big questions, right? But, and also, now we also see quite a number of AI models also coming up with this open source, right? But okay, so so in regards to that, maybe a bit deviating from that. So any specific kind of task or things that the developers could do to get started in this open source field without any, say they are not very advanced yet? Yeah, maybe Marco.
So, are we talking about technical, non-technical?
It could be both.
Okay, so
it's just like entering.
Yeah. Okay. So there's room for both sides. There's room for technical and non-technical. I think one key part in Southeast Asia that is non-technical is translations. There's a lot of languages, a lot of local languages, and that's a big barrier to entry barrier in the region. There's people in Thailand that might not speak English, so having localized documentation or meetups or in the local language can really help. These projects can really help, and you can just be doing that. You don't need to be technical on that side. I mean, on the technical side, the natural way to get started is to start, I would say, as a user. I mean, that's how I started. Just try to check out what projects are open source. Try to figure out a bit how the entire thing works. And then if you have the knowledge, then usually it will just come natural from there. Like you need something, you want to fix something, or you're using certain project that you think is cool, and you think it will be even better if there's some extra feature that can be added, then it might be your opportunity, right? Yeah, and then just build that from there.
So it's one good way to start. It's actually contributing to FOSSASIA projects. Yeah, I think FOSSASIA has quite a number of projects. EventYay, I think the one that you guys are using at the check-in is actually also by FOSSASIA. I think the EventYay team is working very hard on that, and of course Pocket Science Lab and etc. Right? So yeah, moving on. The next question would be actually, what are some of the strategies that developers could use to demonstrate their open source experience during interviews or networking events? Perhaps Peter could answer that question, given you're like a international corporation. Yeah.
Sure. So we actually actively hire from around the world, and part of our general process is to obviously to talk to people to try to understand their skill set, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, and how they want to get there. The problem is, with any sort of interview-like process, it's, by definition, a kind of requirement, short. So, both because you don't want to stress the candidate and you don't want to stress the people actually doing the interviews, you don't have much time. And CVs are very two-dimensional. They never capture exactly what you want to capture. One thing which is extremely useful, and really it's open source that makes this even possible, is to create and then list any of those sorts of things that you've been doing. So for example, if I get a CV from someone and it has a GitHub profile, for me that's really easy because I can go click that and just have a look around. Now we had one candidate who looked amazing on paper, and we were like, okay, well, we want to do a trial project to see, can he do half these things? But whilst we were going through the interview process, we went to his GitHub account, and we saw that he'd written a Game Boy emulator, he did a custom implementation of Lisp, he'd created his own RISC-V processor, and he developed a couple of different language tools. So yeah, we skipped the trial project because there was nothing we could come up with that would beat any of this. But what was key was that you could now see over the period of years how this guy had developed his interests, his skills, how he'd handled people putting in PRs, how he built up a community. All of that stuff, which is really, really, really hard to communicate in an interview, was there for anyone to look at. And because of the way GitHub works and the internet works, everything was kind of like nicely audit trailed. So oh, he's done a couple of talks. Oh, he's written some published papers. Well, there's the published papers. There's the recordings of the talks he did. All of those things play a big part. One easy way to get started is if you're new to a project and you hit an issue, there's a bug, or it was just fiddly to get it installed. Maybe getting it to work on your machine isn't well documented, and you figured it out. Share that. Put that on a blog post somewhere. Put it on GitHub. Put it somewhere. Because I guarantee that if you've hit it, other people have too. And right away, it's showing that contribution. People still have this kind of mindset from, let's say, like the old days where, you know, if you were doing, if you were an artist and you were painting a picture, you would never show your work in progress. You would show the final item. Today, though, you can show the entire progress, and that's often more interesting than the end result. So, cool, it's nice that you want to build this amazing thing, but how did you get there? What issues did you hit? What resources did you find useful? If you document your journey, because you won't be the only one doing this, other people will find you and will learn from you. And that will then spread your I won't say influence, but passively your knowledge will kind of benefit others. But also when it comes to interviews, there is now a paper trail everywhere of all the kind of cool stuff that you've been doing, all the interesting things you've played with, and the content you've created.
Okay. So the next one would be on mentorship, right? So I think we had a bit of, those questions earlier were a bit on career development. So if you have any questions, feel free to scan the QR code. I think we still have a bit of time to run through a bit later. So I think the one more question for Marco would be, how do you actually find the right community to go to for mentorship? Yeah.
The right community for mentorship. Okay. I think initially, I think it has to be first that what's on your interest, right? Like there has to be some project that you like. There's in software engineering, there's many fields. So once you figure out what part of the entire ecosystem is on your interest, and then you start, as I said, I would say you start as a user, you start seeing what projects you like, and then I guess the natural move would be just to look, it's open source, you look at the source code, and then try to get an idea of how the project works. I think that's an important way. There's many governance models among the projects, right? So I think you'll have to find one that you also align with, right? Like there's projects that have some the benign dictatorship model. There's projects that are more distributed. There's projects that are mainly they're open source, but they're owned by a certain company in a certain way. So there's a gateway there for contributions. So you also have to be in a place where you can align with this, and then like if depending on that project, you should try to figure out like how mentorship can work, right? And I would say it's project specific, how these people are. One thing I would say is don't be self-entitled, because there's many times these mentors are doing this on their free time, or they're doing this and mentoring is not their, or maybe just mentoring is not their priority. So you should be thankful for these people's time, like even just reviewing a PR or just even criticizing your work. It's sometimes it's a way to help you get better, right? So you shouldn't be afraid of getting out there, but also at the same time you should be aware that it's not these people's jobs to most of the time it's not their job to just teach you how to do things in their project, right? So I think you have to do your duties first. You have to read documentation. You have to put the hard work, right? You can't just expect send an email to a certain address and be like, hey, can you help me get started? And then have someone come over and do all the work for you, right? You have to put the work first, and then once you show that you went through documentation, you went through source code. Sometimes many open source projects that don't have that much great documentation because a lot of developers, they don't find fun on writing documentation. So you might have to go through the source code, or you might to try to figure out things on your own way. So when you go out and try and ask a question, try to make it specific. Don't go and say, hey, can you help me get started? Like try to get, hey, I did this, and this, and finding this problem. And this is the issue. Try to be as specific as you can. So you have to really value mentors' time, because they probably have like a lot of people that are asking for this, and they actually don't really. They will probably have to spend time mostly developing more than just mentoring, right? But what I'm saying is like try to really value the mentor's time, and show that you put in work before you ask for help on their side.
Okay. I think these are coming words from a real mentor, because he's actually a Google Summer of Code mentor as well. So anybody, I think people here should know Google Summer of Code, right? I think we have a number of Google Summer of Code students. Can I have like a show of hands who were a student before? Like, okay, there are some there. I think, yeah. So one at the back there, yeah. So yeah, so Google Summer of Code, I think FOSSASIA was also part of it. So, and we have Marco on it as well. So it's coming, the words are coming out from the real mentor, right? So I hope it's a good advice for everyone. So I think given in lieu of time, maybe we'll just take maybe say one question from the ground. Wait, let me go to, let's see if there's any questions. Okay, so let me choose one. Okay, there's quite a bit. Okay, well, it's quite a fair bit of questions. Okay, maybe I'll just choose this. Okay, the last question. So the question is, how can I convince management to use open source code if the main concern is a supply chain compromise, like a malicious NPM package updates? So I think this was one of the bigger incidents recently, right? There was like update that was pushed. Yeah, who wants to take this question?
So it is a good question, and it's something the open source community is still working on. I mean, if you look at the different languages, the different platforms, these issues, you know, we tend to find them again and again. The thing is, yes, there can be challenges with open source supply chains, and yes, we do need some better ways of trying to verify these and vouch for these. There's a few projects, I think, in the Rust community where you can, as an individual, you can audit code and then say, hey, this looks okay to me, and build up a trust framework behind it. But it's still got a very long way to go. The main point, though, is most of the things that we pull in from open source are quite complicated. If you think of things like, if you're using a front-end website, if you pull in like React, or if you're using Node.js, if you were to try and recreate that yourself, the probability that you will create far more issues and far more security risks than you would ever have from the open source option, which has more eyeballs on it, more people working on it. So yeah, I think probably the best way to do it is to point out that if you do it yourself, you have to maintain it yourself, you have to pay for it yourself, and you have to audit it yourself. All those things that you do yourself. If you work with the open source community, you can pretty much take something off the shelf, and of course you should give back, but you're going to be in a much better place than if you tried to recreate all of thousands of people's of work by yourself.
Okay, so it's a bit like cost-benefit kind of thing, right? Put it away.
Yeah, and because the way open source model works, it's very difficult for people with traditional business mindsets to potentially see those benefits. So some examples are usually helpful.
Okay, cool. So I think just one very fun last question. What do you think of the mango sticky rice in Thailand? Maybe who wants to answer this question? Marco?
It's good, very good.
It's good.
Very good. Yes.
Do you have like a secret hideout or something?
For food-wise, I think Chinatown is a good place to go.
Ah, Chinatown. Yeah, guys, remember to go Chinatown.
But maybe the local Thais can.
Okay, so I think with that we will end this fireside chat. So let's give a round of applause to our guest speakers again, Marco and Peter as well.
Thank you very much, Chung, Weitat, Michael, and Peter.